Shabbat Shalom, everybody. This is Rabbi Stephen, Rav Shmuel, Rosh be with you with this week's 10-minute Torah, which is Parsha Re. And this is a very special portion because we have a young man, Colin, being bar mitzvah this weekend. So if you haven't been to services in a while, please come and let's honor this young man and his very hard work. Young man, yeah, I'm getting older. But then again, to me, a 40-year-old is a young man, so what are you going to do? Okay, but you know what? Time marches on, and that's the way it is. So we've had some inquiries about the high holidays. They're about 6 weeks away, 7 weeks away. They're coming upon us. You know, we just had Tisha B'Av, and the next 7 portions contain Haftarot, which atypically are not connected somehow with the Torah portion. They are what's known as the 7 Haftarot of consolation. So we've been rebuked. You know, this Tisha B'Av is basically our punishment. It's acknowledging our punishment, that we don't have a promised land, that we don't have a temple, that we don't have the temple sanctuary and its rituals anymore because we've fallen short. And in a way, that kind of fits in with this week's Torah portion. But the Haftarot of consolation say, you know, things will work out in the end, you know, if you just turn around and do what you're supposed to do. And that is basically what this Torah portion is talking about. Where, now, again, Deuteronomy is also known as Mishnah Torah, Mishnah from the word Sheni, which is second. So it's a retelling of a lot of the commandments that have been in the previous three books. Genesis, not so many commandments. Yeah, circumcision, yes, be fruitful and multiply. But the bulk really didn't happen until Moses got the 10 commandments, and then we got our flood, our parade of commandments. And now we get some more. There's, I believe, about 70 is part of the commentary, new commandments that are introduced in this portion. There's a few like the commandment on Shabbat that's done a little differently. Same commandment, just from a different perspective. Exodus, remember. Deuteronomy, observe, which means don't forget, which is a positive way of saying don't forget. That's why it's considered the negative. I mean, they're both one coin, but they're two sides of the same coin. Remember and guard or don't forget. Make sure you don't forget. So one of the highlights of this particular Torah portion is that when the Israeli soldiers, the warriors, go into the promised land to conquer it and settle it, they are told to do away with any reminders, any relics, any remnants of the pagan practices that had gone on in that land before they arrived. So Moses is telling people, and here's another interesting thing that he says. He says that if anybody comes to you and proclaims themselves to be a prophet and tells you to do something that is not in the Torah, they are not to be listened to. God is testing you to make sure that you have the fortitude and also give you the opportunity to develop that discipline, not to be taken in by those practices. So why do we have to be reminded about these things? Why do we have to be reminded to do away with the pagan practices, to get rid of what they call the Ashtaroth trees, which has many interpretations? Asherah, I think was the right name, was a Babylonian goddess of, I think, the moon or something. But they're also pagan worship trees. And they're supposed to tear them out by the roots so they don't even grow back. And they tear them out and they destroy them. You're not even allowed to use the wood, lest it be a reminder of some of the things they did. So what is this all about? It's about the fact that pagan practices were a little bit more tempting and enticing than some of our own. Judaism is a very discipline-oriented religion or way of life or civilization. We live by the calendar, and there's always something coming up. I mean, we just get done with Tisha B'Av, and here I am talking about the high holidays, which are 6, 7 weeks away, which is like a whole month. And you can bet that after the high holidays, we'll be talking about Hanukkah, and then we'll be talking about Tu B'Shvat, the New Year for trees, and then Purim, and then Passover, and everything in between. So, and we're always involved in that. What other religion asks you to go to synagogue, Yom Kippur, and not eat or drink for 26 hours, or watch TV, or play video games, or have relations? You know, it's a very discipline-oriented practice. But think about it. You know the old saying, no pain, no gain. That's what made us so strong. We're a stiff-necked people. We need that. We need those rituals to keep us in check, right? So there it is. We're also told, and this is another sense of discipline, that when you loan somebody money, okay, and not just anybody, you're allowed to engage in business practices with people that are not Jewish and loan them money for interest. But we're talking about a situation where somebody needs money. When somebody is destitute, they are so poor they can't survive. You give them money. If somebody is so poor, so destitute, that they can't even make it on their own, they say, please take me in and I'll work for you. You say, okay, you give them a loan. And then, this is slavery, or what we now call slavery. After 7 years, they're done. Or even if it hasn't been 7 years, if the Shemitah year comes, it's not 7 years counting when they work for you. There's a 7-year cycle. If they come to work for you in 6 years, and you've given them a loan, and they're paying off the loan, or they're paying off a debt, they're done. Year and a half, they're done. What other religion says, don't worry about it, you'll be fine? Wait a minute, that's crazy. So the big difference between a lot of these pagan practices and what makes them so tempting is that they involve practices and rituals with things that you can perceive, that you can see, hear, feel, and touch. So you may say, well, gee, Rabbi, what about God giving the 10 Commandments? Didn't 2.5 million people just, look up and say, wow, we're getting the 10 Commandments, there's Hashem. And well, yeah, but how many years ago was that? We have a prayer in the Amida, Modim Anachnu Lak. We thank you for, and part of the verbiage is for the daily miracles. We have things go on in our life we don't even realize. Look at the rampant anti-Semitism prevalent today, and yet here we still are, and we're thriving. We got people coming to the synagogue. I've done one Miller course for Introduction to Judaism over another, and people have been interested. I'm doing one now in Spanish. Okay, so God's watching out for us. But the pagan practices, let's face it, are fun. Back in the day, this day, pagan practices involve satisfying bodily temptations. Right? What did the Romans do? They engaged in orgies. It's a Roman word, right? They all got together and, right, use your imagination. They had these banquets where they were eating so much, they had the vomitarians, right? They go out, they get rid of their food, and they come back and start from scratch, which we think is absurd. It's because the problem is those excesses lead to a lack in morality, because now all you're doing is pursuing pleasure at any cost. Now, Judaism says, sure, you can have pleasure. Absolutely, we want you to have pleasure. We want you to go out and enjoy life. God gave you a life, and aside from that discipline, it's all meant to be fun. Personally, I love Sukkot. I like Yom Kippur, but that's just me. But Sukkot's fun. You build a hut, you go to hang out in it, you can have parties in there. You're observing Sukkot, of course, but it's kind of cool. The Passover Seder, everybody gets together and you're singing and you're banging the table and just having fun and you're eating. That's kind of our way of having. So it's not just do this, do that, don't do this. A life of drudgery serving some unnamed, unknown God. That's another thing. Who's God? Where's God? What is God? We kind of take it for granted that God exists. I could sit down with you and I can give you a lecture on science. And we can talk about the way I see science, how I see science proves the existence of God. But for most people, they don't think about that. They don't get involved in that. It's just like, okay, God is God. I'm going to pray to God. Let's see what happens. I have had people come to me and say, I'm praying for prosperity. Okay, are you getting up in the morning and going to work? And they're like, yeah. I said, then that's it. You're good to go. Um, but is God going to be good to you? And maybe there'll be an unexpected promotion or a raise. Yeah, the idea is if you give to charity, God's going to reward you. If you obey the commandments, the idea is that God's going to reward you. And again, that's a topic for another discussion, maybe a sermon on the high holidays. Um, don't take revenge. I want to, but let God deal with it. So anyway, think about that. Think about some of the things that people that you see in our society, people doing that you may want to do, but Judaism says don't do it. Think about why, or come talk about it. Ask, right? There's very good reasons why we don't do things. Okay, I'm not telling you not to enjoy your life and your company and intermingle, but just remember you're Jews. Okay. All right. Shabbat shalom. We will see you in services. And again, call me, text me, email me.